Díomh is mise dahío seanachán ó Blachlia in Éireann, agus san isis tá in gcónaí Grenville sa Grenville chuig, agus ben mé caintiniu maiall an chun Nucleas Gael. My name is David Shanahan. I'm from Dublin in Ireland. I came to Canada in 1982 to do graduate work. So I have a PhD in Canadian history. I work primarily with Indigenous communities across the country, doing historical research and things like this. But today I want to talk about something that is in some ways almost unique to Ireland, to my own culture, and that is the Gaelic Athletic Association, or as everybody knows it, the GAA. And it has, I think, a unique status in Ireland compared to any other sport in any other country. And that's because it's so linked to the history and to the culture. In the late 1880s, there was a sense in Ireland. Ireland at that point was still part of the United Kingdom. It had only been 40 years since the Great Famine, which had killed over 1 million Irish people. Another 1.5 million had been forced to leave the country. And many of those people had come from rural areas where traditional Gaelic culture was strongest. So the language was still being used, the Irish language, the language I began with. And so there was a sense in the 1880s that Ireland was losing its identity culturally, as well as politically. And so two movements took place in the late 1880s, very much linked. One was to restore the Irish language and to make it a spoken language generally within the country. And the second was the Gaelic Athletic Association. And the main point of that organization was to reintroduce and popularize traditional Gaelic sports, which were Gaelic football, hurling, there was a handball, and there was a game called rounders, which is very much like baseball. And the key, the secret to the success of the GAA was that it organized on a local level, so that every village, every parish had its own club and its own team. And so the teams would range through the age groups. So there was a society there where people could come together of all ages and they would get involved in this. And the Irish language was used a great deal. So the two things went together. And then as time went by, this became a national phenomenon because it was based on a parish local level. It meant that parishes and villages could play games against each other. And then if you were really good in your club, you might be picked to represent your county. And the island of Ireland has got 32 counties. And so every county then could have its own team, and then the counties played against each other. And then there would be an all-Ireland competition. So the top two counties in football and in hurling would be able to play each other. And this became a major cultural event in the country, and it still is. The remarkable thing about it was that up till about maybe the last 25, 30 years, this was an all-amateur sport. So nobody got paid, neither the players, nor the officials, nor the managers, the coaches, nobody. Now there's a certain amount of financial support for players and all this kind of stuff, just for travel and all the rest of it. But it gives you an indication of how popular it is. Aside from every parish having its own team, that meant they had their own pitch, their own place to play, which became a social centre in itself. But on the national level, when you have the All-Ireland events, the main stadium for this is in Dublin. And its capacity is almost 83,000. So you have some idea of just how many people are involved and support this. So you have two counties playing each other, and you've got 83,000 people coming together to watch this. How are these games different? Gaelic football, it looks almost like a cross between soccer and rugby, in a way, in that it's played with a round ball, like soccer. But the players, there's 15 on each team. The players can carry the ball, but only for a certain number of steps. Then you have to either bounce it or kick it up and catch it again. It can be passed by punching it one to the other or kicked from one to the other. And the pitches are roughly twice the size of a soccer field. So there's a lot of space to run around in to pass the ball in. The goals are rather like a rugby goal, kind of a H-shaped. And if you kick the ball under the bar, that's a goal, which is the equivalent of 3 points, a point if you go over the bar. So it's very interesting, complicated, so you always have to know. If the score is 5 goals and 15 points to 5 goals and 12 points, you have to count in your head how many points is that in total, because that will tell you who's winning. It requires a certain math, you see. But it is, it's a game then that is very colorful, and it gives a real identity, and this is what obviously the founders wanted. Because aside from having their own teams, every county in Ireland has its own colour, or colours. So that I'm from Dublin. So the Dublin colours are a sky blue and a navy blue, so 2 bars. And that's to reflect that Ireland is on the sea, on the Irish Sea, and it's surrounded by the mountains, so it's the sky and the sea are the 2 big things. Counties like Kerry will have green and gold. There's green and red in Mayo, so all of these colours are there. So that gives a sense of identity on a county level, as well as a national level. So you can see that all of these things become really important in bringing back a sense of Irish culture and a social aspect. And even after 1921, when Ireland, 26 counties of Ireland became an independent nation, 6 counties in Ulster are still part of the United Kingdom. But the GAA remained a 32 county organisation. And that in itself became important because it maintained links on both sides of the island and people could play games together. It was different in that while everybody could play soccer, called football, or rugby, or cricket, and Ireland has very successful teams in all of these sports considering the size of the population, Gaelic football and hurling are the 2 biggest sports in the country still. The most supported, the most involved, so more people play these games than any of the others. So it becomes something that over time has become a strength, and something that's almost, I was going to say almost unique to Ireland, but in fact Gaelic games are now played in other places. Australia, Irish immigrants to Australia developed their own version called Australian rules football, which I don't understand at all. It's got the strangest collection of rules. But what's interesting is that every year the All-Ireland champions in Gaelic football go to Australia and play the Australian champions in Australian rules, and they have 2 games, one in Australian rules, one in GAA. It's rather kind of fun that way. There are also teams in Canada, so that, for example, in Ottawa, I think there are 3 Gaelic football teams, and others then in Edmonton and some I think in BC. So it has its fans across the world, but it is unusual in that it is so Irish. It's founded there, that's where it belongs, that's where the organisation is based. Soccer may have been founded in one country, but it is played equally in so many other places, all of whom claim that they're the best and they started it anyway. So this makes it different. And in terms of the Irish themselves, as I said, when this organisation was founded, Ireland was just 40 years away from this incredibly traumatic event. Ireland has not yet regained the same population as it had before the famine. Even today, we're only barely getting to that point where we're starting to match the population. That's how bad it was, that's how serious it was. And there was a real danger at one point that Ireland would become simply another colony of Britain, that they would become more British in their outlook or in their identity. Now, possibly a direct link between the GAA and the role of these games, and the role of the Irish language, and the 2 are very, very much intertwined, is that by 1916, there was a very strong nationalist movement that in 1921 won independence for the 26 counties. So the GAA was very strongly linked with this. And on a negative level, it became politicized in the sense that there was a ban on anyone who wanted to be part of the GAA. They were not allowed to play foreign games, i.e. soccer, rugby, cricket, any of those things. And that meant that there was a sort of a divide there, that people felt there was a loyalty to one or the other. Of course, I know, and there have been so many players who began in Gaelic football and became very successful in Gaelic football, and then later went on to play for top teams in soccer in England or on the Irish national soccer team, and they gained all their experience going through the schools. When I went through school, for example, you weren't allowed to play any of those games in school. Organised sport in schools was GAA. It was Gaelic football and hurling primarily. And to a large extent that's still the case. It's just that the ban is gone. So there is that freedom. The fear was, obviously, that if you took away the ban and if you didn't force people to play your game, it wouldn't be successful. It would, because the lure, especially of soccer, was so great. But in fact, that hasn't changed anything. You've still got the 83,000 people going to the All-Ireland final. You still have an incredibly strong support and identity, fanaticism when it comes to your county, especially. And that's still there. So it hasn't taken away from the sense of identity. It hasn't taken away in terms of popularity. So that's really important. So you have this amazing phenomenon called the GAA, Common Class Gael, which was founded with a very clear purpose to prevent the loss of Irish culture and to maintain a certain identity and tradition, which has been incredibly successful at doing those things. Incorporating the Irish language, you'll find, for example, that all the officials, like the managers, the coaches, the water guys, they all have their position written on the back of their shirts in Irish. You know, there's no English involved in this at all. A lot of the games, when they're televised, are televised in Irish, also in English, but there's certainly the Irish there. And it covers the entire country. It covers every aspect, every age group. So it is a real pillar of Irish culture, even today, even with kind of a more secular and a more international kind of environment that we operate in. This is still there, and this still gives a sense of identity, a sense of who we are as a people. That plays a role in society that I don't think any sport in any other country does.